Hey friends, so today's short story, Return to Cinder, was originally written as a fundraiser. When my son and his wife were trying to adopt, which cost thousands and thousands of dollars, they held a fundraiser to raise money for the adoption. And someone suggested to me that I offer a short story where the character was a real life person. And I didn't think that anybody would want that. Knowing what I know about character arcs and how people have to learn and they have to grow. And anyway, people convinced me that was indeed something that people would pay money for. And so I offered a short story and people could bid on it, and I had lots of people who wanted that. But the one who won was actually my daughter-in-law's mom, Angelique. And of course, you want to write a story where people learn and they grow. And I didn't want to offend Angelique because I love her. But so I was in this quandary of what to write for her. Because she was paying a lot of money for this short story about herself. And anyway, so I have a friend, actually it's my daughter's friend, whose family had this very bizarre experience back in probably the 80s or 90s. So before cell phones, before GPS, maybe even before the internet. And they had this very bizarre experience, which I won't spoil. I will read you the story, but it is based on this family's experiences. And if you've ever had anything like this happen to you, I'd love to hear about it because it's so it's so Twilight Zone. So originally I wrote the story for Angelique so that Jared and Jen could adopt Phoenix, which they did. A happy story. They have since had 2 of their own children and adopted another. So they have 6 children between the ages of 3 and 6, which is, insanity, but super fun when we're together. And then there was a contest for put on by movies, somebody, anyway. So I entered this story. So it was tweaked a little bit from Angelique and written for this contest, and it actually got pretty far. And the funny thing is that a friend in my writers group, he also had a short story. His short story got a little further than mine. But I think it was like a quarterfinalist or a semifinalist or something, which was very fun, but not a movie. And actually, I don't know if it would make a very good movie because it's when they wrote me back and told me all the things that they liked about the story. They said it was a quiet story, and it is. It's a quiet story. So what I'm reading today is called Return to Cinder. And I hope you enjoy it. So here we go. Angela left the wedding earlier than she'd planned, but later than she should have. A cold winter sun tipped near the horizon of the empty Nevada sky. Scrub oak and cacti littered the sun-baked ground. An occasional tumbleweed dared to cross the 2-lane highway that cut through the desert. An audiobook helped her putter through the hours. She'd chosen Les Miserables more for its length than its storyline. She'd seen both the musical and the movie, but somewhere between Coaldale and Tonopah, the narrator's voice sputtered and coughed before falling silent. Angela glanced at her dashboard. Strange. The lights and gauges seemed to work. She tried the radio. White noise filled her car. At first, the sound seemed as empty as rushing wind, but after a few moments, she heard sharp clips of a foreign language. She spun the radio dial to the right, searching for another station, but only barks of strange language greeted her. Russian? No, that wasn't it. German? That didn't sound right either. Suddenly, the radio fell silent too. Her eyes darted up to the rearview mirror, seeing only murky dust clouds behind her as they rolled off the spinning tires. What if the car broke down? The last town she'd driven through was nothing more than a gas station, a cafe, and a general store. The only cars she'd spotted had been a patrol car parked at the lone intersection with a mannequin behind the wheel, probably as a deterrent to speeders trying to run away from such a dead-end sort of place. Vegas was the next major city. With one hand on the wheel and the other in her purse, she rummaged for her phone. It, like the radio, was dead. Knowing it should have been fully charged, she tried turning it on. The screen remained dark. She plugged it into her car charger and began to hum a few lines from the song, Castle on a Cloud. Miles flew by and boredom settled across her shoulders. She tried the radio a few more times, but even the white noise with the muted foreign conversation remained silent. A glance at her phone told her that it was still dead. The charger hadn't helped at all. Apprehension tickled her imagination. What if there was something wrong with the car's electrical system? She pulled off the road, unsure of what to do next. Climbing from the car, she rolled her shoulders and tried to ease the nervous tension pinging up and down her spine. She knew she was on Highway 95. She hadn't veered off the freeway, except for that quick stop in, what's the name of that town? She leaned against the hood and worried at a hangnail on her pointy finger. A breeze lifted her skirt and her spirits. You're not lost, she told herself. You just need to turn around and get back on the right road. You'll be in Vegas by sundown, and you've driven to Vegas from Gilbert so many times you could do it in your sleep. If she had to, she could spend the night in Vegas with her cousin Gabby. She leaned into the car and glanced at the dark dashboard. She had no idea how much gas she had. She didn't know what time it was. She obviously wasn't heading in the right direction. She gave herself a small shake and a quick silent lecture on letting her imagination run wild. How far was she from Area 51? Wasn't it strange that the U.S. had military ammunition depots surrounding the infamous outpost closest to the nation's largest magnesium mine? Magnesium, aliens, military outpost. She was drawing random conclusions out of clues that had no reference to each other. She was bored, tired, and longing for home. Jody's wedding had been a hurried, thrown-together affair. The way you do anything is the way you do everything. Jody lived her entire life flying by the seat of her pants and expecting everyone who loved her to come dancing when she sang. But Angela loved her cousin, and so she'd made the 12-and-a-half-hour drive for the 10-minute ceremony in a Reno casino chapel. She'd even worn the red dress Jody had picked out for her. But at this moment, sweat was pooling between her breasts, and the red chiffon was clinging to her legs, and not in a good way. Angela bent at the waist and let her hands dangle toward her toes. She righted herself in time to see a black and white patrol car aiming for her. The police car drew along beside her and rolled down its window. A grandfatherly sort of man bearing a strong resemblance to the picture on the package of her favorite oatmeal smiled at her. Sunlight glistened off the sheriff's badge on his chest. Howdy, ma'am. Looks like you got yourself some problems. I'm not sure. I mean, the car runs fine now, but everything on the dashboard is dark. The sheriff rolled his car in front of hers, climbed out, and hitched up his belt as he ambled toward her. Sounds like an electrical problem. Angela lifted her shoulder. I thought so too. The sheriff studied the fading sun. Best bring it in and let Lester take a look at it. That's our local mechanic. You could try for Vegas, but it's a good 200 miles away. If you end up stranded on the road, well, let's just say it'd be a fair piece to walk in those fancy shoes. Angela glanced down at her red sparkly high heels. I have more practical shoes in my bag. Still, the thought of wandering in the desert for miles scared her. Why don't you follow me into town? I'll call Lester and let him know you're coming. Angela agreed, got back into her car, and tried to start the ignition. It clicked, but the engine didn't turn over. Her shoulders sagged in defeat. The sheriff climbed from his car and headed her way. He took off his wide-brimmed hat and scratched his bald head. Looks like this car ain't going nowhere on its own. I put in a call to Lester to bring his tow truck. Angela's thoughts sputtered to the list of things she needed to get done this weekend. The briefcase beside her contained dozens of legal documents she needed to review to make sure all the I's were dotted and all the T's were crossed. She couldn't trust her assistant Carol because she was new. Irritation flashed through Angela. She didn't really understand why she seemed to blow through assistants the way policemen munched through donuts. You okay here on your own? The sheriff's eyes twinkled with concern mixed with pity. Lester should be here in a shake of a pig's tail. I'm fine. Angela glanced at her briefcase. She carried her work with her everywhere. She believed in using her islands of time wisely. It's what made her successful. After the sheriff left, Angela tried to roll up her window, but of course it wouldn't budge. The electrical panel, she reminded herself. A warm wind blew through the car. She didn't remember rolling down the other window, but she must have. It was nice now, but she knew it would get cold as soon as the sun set. She wondered how far Lester had to come and exactly how long did it take for a pig to shake its tail. Angela clicked to open her briefcase just as a puff of breeze blew through the car. Her papers lifted into the air and sailed out the window. She scrambled after them, knocking her briefcase to the floor. She jumped out of the passenger door. She stared at her life's work dancing in the sky. She didn't know which one to chase. They all seemed to be flying in different directions. She leaped after one paper and then another, but they floated just beyond her reach, as if a cruel puppeteer had attached them to strings and was intentionally yanking them skyward. Angela huffed and placed her hands on her hips. She could draw up more documents. Just then, a truck pulled into view. Angela shielded her eyes to better watch Lester's tow truck rumbling her way. He pulled in front of her car, backed up, and dropped a large hook before climbing from the truck. Lester reminded her of someone, but she couldn't say who. He pushed back his cap and grinned at her. "Got yourself stuck?" She nodded. "Well, I'm happy to take a look at for you, but we better get a move on before that storm blows in." Angela glanced at the purple clouds gathering on the distant hills. "Looks like a nasty one, too," Lester said. Angela gathered her overnight bag and now nearly empty briefcase from her car. She looked around for her papers, but there wasn't a single one in sight. She tottered on her high heels to the passenger side of Lester's truck and climbed in. Moments later, after the Lexus was securely hoisted midair, Lester joined her. He asked where she was headed and where she'd come from, and she told him about the wedding. "Got someone waiting at home for you?" "My husband is on a hunting trip with his brother's family." Mark had begged her to come, but when Jody's wedding came up, she was glad she had an excuse not to go. She loved Ron's family, but a whole week of hanging out in the woods was not on her to-do list. Not that any of that was Lester's business. Lester's eyes crinkled with kindness, and he tried to soften the blow of his next words. "I'm just not sure how much I'll be able to do, it being the weekend and all. And tomorrow's the Sabbath." "Are you Mormon?" she asked. "How'd you know?" "Takes one to know one, I guess." She realized who he reminded her of, Uncle Jib. A large man with a big laugh and even bigger heart. "I hate to tell you, there ain't no hotel in Cinder." "Cinder?" she repeated. He nodded. "Closest town for 100 miles. You might not feel like it right now, but you're actually lucky your car chose to broke down where it did." Lucky. He was right. That was definitely not how she was feeling. "There's a ward party planned for tonight. Brother and Sister Jenkins got their mission call, and all their kids are in town to send them off big time." She heard the longing in his voice. "That sounds lovely. I hate to make you miss it." "Well, let's see what we can do to get you back on the road." Lester began to fill her in on the Jenkins, their kids, and all the other townsfolk who would be at the party. When Angela didn't respond with more than a murmur or an occasional nod, Lester abandoned the conversation. A comfortable silence filled the cab, and Angela found herself wondering about the papers that had flown away. After a few miles, raindrops began pelting the windshield. She imagined the papers soaking her documents and turning them into mush. She sucked in a deep breath, realizing that if not for the sheriff, she would have been stuck in the storm 100 miles from anyone and anything. Lightning flashed as they drove into town. "Welcome to Cinder," the sign read. "Population 368. They passed a Mormon church, a general store, a diner called Susie's, and a gas station/mechanic shop. Lester pulled the truck alongside the shop. "Ain't much, but it's home." Home. She thought longingly of her home with Ron. It would be empty, silent. The cool beige and creamy decor, a welcome relief from her hectic career. She belonged there. She did not belong in this tiny town. A warm light poured through the windows of the chapel across the street. People hunkering beneath umbrellas and raincoats dashed across the parking lot and through the open door. Lester nodded at the church. "If you're hungry, that place right there is your best bet. Susie already closed her diner." "I can't just crash their party." "Why not? They'll be happy to have you." He threw the car into park. Don't tell them you're a member. Let them think they're doing missionary work. They'll be filling you up with green Jello salad before you can say howdy. Angela swallowed. Maybe I can just hang out in the library? When she realized that she hadn't seen a library, she added, or in your waiting room? Nah, ain't got a waiting room. All my customers either wait for repairs at Sister Susie's, but seeing how she's closed, Angela took the hint. She gathered up her bag and purse, thanked Lester, and tried to dodge raindrops as she splashed across the street to the chapel. Conversations hushed as she pushed through the door. A man with a large silver buckle greeted her with an outstretched hand. I'm Angela, she said, aware that everyone in the foyer had stopped to listen. She explained her car problems. Well, Angela, the big man said, I'm Bishop Baxter. He held out his hand and motioned at a woman across the room. She trotted to his side. And this here is Sister Baxter. If Lester can't fix your jalopy anytime soon, we'd love to have you stay with us. Oh, no, I can't do that, Angela said, even as a quiet dread filled her, letting her know that this was exactly what was going to happen. And it did. At first, she'd been horrified when Lester told her that it would be several days before the party needed would arrive. She couldn't imagine how she'd pass the time, but Sister Baxter and other members of the ward had happily filled her days. She'd helped Sister Clark plant her tomatoes. She'd joined a quilting guild as they made up blankets for refugees, and then Sister Nelson needed help cleaning out her basement. 3 days later, Angela left Cinder with a working car and a happy heart. It seemed the whole town gathered to say goodbye when Lester finally declared her car safe for travel. Take care, Sister Baxter said, wrapping her in a warm, tight hug. Be safe, Sister Clark said, taking both of Angela's hands in hers. Now, I got your address, all right, so I can be sure to send you some of my tomato jelly? Angela nodded and blinked back tears. Godspeed, girlie, Lester said, tipping back his hat and giving her a grin. Angela climbed into her car, started up her engine, and waved goodbye. She didn't care that her briefcase was empty because her heart was full. After quickly finding her way back onto the road, she arrived home 5 hours later. The audiobook version of Les Mis kept her company. After unpacking her things and taking a shower, she pulled out the thank you notes she used to send her clients. She found at the heavy cream and gold embossed stationery. They were expensive and lovely, but somehow not quite right. Professional, but cold. She needed something that could convey her gratitude for the reminder that life could be simpler, joyful, and full of meaningful service. On a whim, she pulled out her paints. Of course, she hadn't painted a thing in several years, not since her girls were little. She expected to find the watercolors dried and hard, but with a little bit of water, they worked just fine. She made cards for the Baxters, Sister Clark, Lester, and a collective one for all the ladies of the Quilting Guild. Life resumed. Work went on. Mark came home. It was all the same, but different. Angela began leaving her work at her office and filled her islands of time in new ways. She taught herself to make tomato jelly. She bought some fabric and joined a local quilting guild. She dug out her old easel and started painting again. One evening, Mark interrupted her painting session. Where are all these cards? He asked as he shuffled through the mail. Angela pushed the hair from her face with the back of her hand, put down her paintbrush, and reached for the cards. The words "Return to Sender, address unknown" was stamped across each of them. These are the cards I made for the people I met in Cinder, she said, turning them over, searching for a clue as to why they'd been returned. I must have gotten the zip code wrong. She pulled away from the easel and padded into her office. After wiping her hands on the hem of her paint shirt, she settled it in front of her computer, turned it on, and typed Cinder, Nevada into the search bar. No results. This can't be right, she murmured. Ron peered over her shoulder. What? There's no Cinder, Nevada. Could you have been in California? No, I'm sure. Try it anyway. Nothing. Maybe you're spelling it wrong. But I saw the sign. I saw signs everywhere. Ah, a sign, Mark joked. It's not funny. Angela's fingers flew over the keyboard as she searched for wait. The only person she knew by their first name had been Lester. Everyone else had been simply brother or sister, but Lester, she had paid him with a credit card. She pulled up her bank statement. But the 3 days she'd been at Cinder were surprisingly free of financial transactions. He fixed your car but didn't charge you? Mark asked. Can't be much of a businessman. Maybe just not yet. She dropped her forehead to the desk. Am I crazy? Ron put his hand on her shoulder. You are one of the sanest people I know. Thank you. She straightened her shoulders. I'm not sure. What else could have happened? Mark asked. I blacked out, had some sort of episode? Met a town full of aliens, Mark quipped. Whatever. Angela tried to laugh, but fell silent. I'm still glad it happened. Then I am too, Mark said as he pulled her into his arms and hugged her. She settled against him with a sigh. 3 days later, a package without a return address arrived. The postmark read, Rachel, Nevada. Angela set the package on her kitchen counter, almost afraid to touch it. Ron handed her a pair of scissors. Open it. No, you do it. Nope, it was your alien encounter. Her hands trembled as she cut through the brown postal paper and cardboard box. There, wrapped in a swath of calico fabric, lay a mason jar of jelly beside a handwritten card. Dear Angela, thank you for your lovely visit. We also enjoyed getting to know you a little bit better and pray that you know how much we love you. Take care, Sister Baxter. P.S. You should sell your paintings at the Gilbert Art Walk. Huh, Mark said as he peeked over her shoulder. Did you talk about painting while you were there? Angela fumbled through her memories of her time in Cinder, the place that seemed to exist only in her mind. She didn't remember talking much, but rather she had let the conversations wash over her. She had been surrounded by the laughter, the gossip, a part of it, but not a contributor. In fact, she realized, that was an apt description of her life until her stay in Cinder. Now, I don't think I did, but I'm not sure I said anything at all. She puzzled over her time in Cinder for days, months, and years, but eventually, when she thought about it, she always smiled. And although the events of those 3 days blurred into one smear of a happy memory, a line from Victor Hugo's Les Mis rang clear. There is nothing like a dream to create a future. The end. Okay, so what's fun about this story is it actually happened to my friend's family. Their car broke down. They ended up staying in a town, and they stayed with members of their church for 3 or 4 days. And then when they got home, they couldn't find the name of the town on any map or anywhere. But their family had stayed there. They had stayed with people. So anyway, I turned it into a short story. I hope you enjoyed it. I would love to hear your opinions. Leave it in the comments. I hope you enjoyed the story. And if you did, please subscribe. You can sign up for my newsletter. And until next week, thanks.